You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
This is Force 13 live as we have Cyclone Batsirai bearing down on the island of La Reunion this evening local time, and Batsarai is set to make an impact on the island of Madagascar in the next 2 days. La Reunion still under a red cyclone alert at this hour, and we have yellow and green cyclone warnings now in effect for the island of Madagascar. My name is Timothy Ringo. I will be with you for the next hour. Nathan still currently on vacation at this time. We're going to fade our team in this afternoon, evening local time in Madagascar and Mauritius, which consists of Isaac and Thomas. Good afternoon to you guys. Good evening to those in Madagascar and Mauritius. Gentlemen, what are your guys' thoughts on Cyclone Batsirai at this hour?
Well, I think the current thought is, we can see the storm here on that satellite imagery you've got up, and we can see rather clearly that there is a large eye that is starting to come out. So when it comes to current things, unfortunately, it's looking like this trend of Batsarai being a minimal Category 3. It's probably coming to a close now, and this storm is going to begin re-strengthening again here in short order before it does get to the coastline of Madagascar, unfortunately. So at this point, it's overall not looking good because the storm is now larger and it's going to be able to pack a punch as it does move towards the Madagascar shore. It's currently a stage 7 on the CDPS scale, nearly a stage 8. It's literally 0.1 points away, and for context, there's about, 5 or 6 point gap between the different stages. So you're looking at a very powerful storm. Stage 7, extremely close to stage 8 on the CDPS scale. That's a higher rating than Laura got, just for some context for our American viewers. So this is looking like a really bad situation right now.
Absolutely, Thomas. And looking at what we do have going on, we do have, as we said at the top of the show, a lot of watches and warnings still going on. Obviously, La Reunion still getting hammered at this hour. They are still under that red alert, cyclonic alert for the island of Reunion. Mauritius has dropped all of their class warnings as of this time. However, they still do have a strong wind and high sea warnings in effect for the island of Mauritius. Still possible 100 to 120 kilometer hour winds being felt on the island of Mauritius at this time. Getting into the other warnings, we have the latest graphic from Meteo Madagascar, where they now have yellow cyclone alerts for most of central and eastern Madagascar, including the northern provinces, some of the southern provinces, and now onto the western coastline of Madagascar. So the Madagascar government really taking this storm very serious, as right now, I think some of the forecasts do bring this back up to almost Category 4, if I was hearing correctly.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's looking like a Category 4 is possible from this. We do have I do have a cone up on my screen here. This is courtesy of Kin, one of our graphic producers. This is what Meteo France's latest forecast is. You can see here rather clearly they're expecting it to re-strengthen all the way up to 145 miles per hour for weakening very rapidly after it moves ashore, with that 145 mile an hour landfall intensity being possible. I do want to note that the way that we calculate landfall intensity is whatever the point before the landfall is, that's what we presume the landfall intensity is, since we use official estimates now. But I would like to note that because it's all the way down to 110 miles an hour just inland, there is a good chance that this will be a bit weaker than 145 miles per hour when it does actually end up hitting land. Regardless of whether it does become a Category 4 or not, the storm is going to be very large, it's going to be very dangerous, and regardless of just how strong the winds get, the rain, the storm surge, the flooding is still going to be devastating.
Absolutely, Thomas, and that is one of the big concerns that we're still even seeing in around Mauritius and La Reunion, still seeing some storm surge in those areas. I know we had a couple of images up on our stream yesterday of up to 4 to 10 meter waves impacting the Mauritius and La Reunion area, and that is going to be coming towards the Madagascar region probably here in the next 24 to 36 hours. Obviously, Batsarai has kind of stalled, undergone an eyewall replacement cycle a little bit through the overnight and morning hours, and that forward motion was about 10 or 12 miles per hour yesterday. Now it's down to a mere 4 to 5 miles per hour at last check.
Yeah, 4 miles an hour is the current movement according to Meteo France, and you can see there it's just stalling on the satellite. It's absolutely slowed down to a large degree, and you can see it just sitting there. If this thing's moving slowly when it moves into Madagascar here in a couple days' time, that's going to increase those rainfall totals even further than they're already expected to be.
Yep, and we're going to take a couple different looks at it. Obviously, Thomas using the infrared there off of Windy, which is that still looks like a very beautiful storm. I mean, that eye starting to really get acted back together after going through that eyewall replacement cycle during the overnight and morning hours. And we'll come back over to the real Earth imagery where you can just see how intense this cyclone is. Really beautiful with that eye starting to come out there on the satellite imagery. But again, this is a very eerie, very dangerous storm that you want to take seriously.
Absolutely the case. This is an extremely dangerous situation, and it's something that does need to be watched very closely as it does continue to move in the general direction of Madagascar. The storm is expected to strike again, Category 4 intensity at this time, Stage 7 on the CDPS scale. Something I do want to go over real quick, if it's all right. I think that the rainfall is a major threat with this. I think personally it's going to be the most major threat with this, so I can actually take a look at a few different scenarios. My current favored scenario is actually from the European model over the next 5 days or so, and you can see here in millimeters what the rainfall is expected to be. About 500 more millimeters of rain possible there on La Reunion, hence the red cyclone alert that's currently in place. And then as this moves towards the Madagascar coastline, you can see right along the coast there, near wherever it makes landfall, you're going over 400 millimeters of rain, and in the most mountainous regions, you're exceeding 500 millimeters of rain. So that's very dangerous, and for our American viewers, that's over 16 inches of rain. So that is quite a bit, over 500 millimeters. That's an extremely dangerous situation, to say the very least. And this is going to be going all the way up and down from the central to southern coastlines of Madagascar before this thing moves into the Mozambique Channel, where uncertainty begins to rise on what exactly the impacts could look like.
That is very true, Thomas. And just taking a look, and we're actually going to get a map up of Madagascar here just for a sense of topography of what we're looking at. Just so the viewers have a little bit of context here, is that Madagascar is a very unusual island out in the southwest Indian Ocean where the coastline is all the flat land, and then you have this mountainous region in the top and goes down through the middle. So that is what you were alluding to, Thomas, is, yeah, we're going to see very heavy rains along the coastlines, places like Manakora, getting up to Mazia. But once you start getting into the mountainous regions, that's where the rainfall is going to be the biggest threat. Obviously, mountainous regions will tear a cyclone up very well, but that rainfall will lead to some flash flooding and mudslides in and around some of these more mountainous regions.
That's absolutely the case, and it's looking really, it's looking like it is really going to be a bad situation over there, because we just had Anna, and now we're having this, and the flooding is going to be bad. I do want to note the flooding is definitely going to be bad. And I cannot stress enough that regardless of whether this is a category 2, 3, 4, or maybe even a 5, doesn't matter where it is on the Safir Simpson scale, you need to be preparing for that flooding the same. It's going to be the same when it comes to flooding. Wind speeds might be a little different. That impacts a small area. You need to be preparing for the flooding, for the storm surge, for all of that if you're along the Madagascar coast, especially within those yellow alerts.
Absolutely, Thomas, and we'll come back over to the satellite. We'll come back over to the satellite view there. A little bit of a misclick there. There's one for the blooper reel. As it seems like this is not a Force 13 stream unless we have something break or a mistake or something on air. So there's one for the blooper reel. But yeah, getting back over to on the more serious note of things. This is from Meteo Madagascar, and this is their surf warning they have out. Strongly recommended, as you can see on the map. Imminent danger going all the way from the north, all the way down to the south coast of Madagascar. This is all in French, so my French is not that great. But just in a nutshell, from what I'm reading, wave action can be anywhere between 4 to 10 meters along the coast, with possible winds anywhere between 55 kilometers to 80 and 100 kilometers an hour being possible for gusts. So definitely sea travel in this area is highly discouraged and not recommended. The northern and southern sides of the western coast of Madagascar right now are under a green alert for the coastline. So definitely be taking caution in those areas as well.
That's definitely the case. I do want to go over now what exactly those green and yellow alerts mean for places in Madagascar. If you're in a green alert, that means that you have 5 to 2 days before the storm is going to strike. There's a cyclone nearby, but the threat to local areas is still vague and unclear. They're saying you need to be careful. The weather situation is on alert and local authorities are informed. The actions that you need to take if you're in a green alert, you want to listen regularly and attentively to weather information on radio and television. Places like Force 13, also reputable places to go for that sort of information. You can also reinforce your doors and windows. That's something else that you should do to prepare for stronger winds, possibly. You want to have a sufficient stock of candles and electric batteries to make sure that you still have light sources through this and ways to remain sheltered. And finally, you want to keep medications and papers in a dry place. That's for the green alert. If you're in a yellow alert, that means that you have 1 to 2 days before this impacts you. The cyclone threats the locality, but the danger is not immediate. That means that you are going to have a cyclone striking you. You're going to get those impacts. There is not much uncertainty anymore. It's just that it is still about a day or two out. In the next few hours, be very vigilant. Local authorities will take all measures they deem useful. You want to stay safe and informed, and the threat notice may vary. It may be short or non-existent before you know that it's here if you're just waiting for the cyclone. The cyclone hazards will come very quickly after the rain begins. So, actions to take. You want to listen constantly to radio and television news or your YouTube outlets. Anywhere that you can get news regarding the cyclone, you want to be there. You want to abandon waterfront houses. So if you're along the coast, you don't want to be there. Go to a safe place. If the house is not a safe place, you want to make sure that you know of a good shelter, a place that's substantial, sturdy, so you can protect yourself from both flooding and strong winds. You want to stock up enough for a few days on things like food and water, stuff like that. So I'd say 3 days, that's a gallon of water per person per day, and then you want to have 3 cans of food per person per day, something like that, if you can. You want to cease all maritime activities, so anything outside, any sort of stuff like that. You want to store drinking water, place livestock in a safe place, and bring all canoes back to the mainland and moor them well before the cyclone arrives. You have about 2 days before landfall. You have about 36 hours before the brunt of this is really going to start getting to you. So it's definitely a dangerous situation indeed in Madagascar.
Absolutely, Thomas. And we do have the latest bulletin that was released from Meteo Madagascar. This would have been 4 p.m. local time. So if you are in any of these regions, obviously this is all in French. So the summary from it is Meteo Madagascar still has Batsarai at 175 kilometers an hour. If you are in any of the regions that are in yellow, you are under that yellow cyclone alert that Thomas was just alluding to. So your preparations need to be coming to completion. probably in the next 12 to 24 hours before the cyclone conditions start coming on shore. And if you are in any of these regions that are in green, those are the areas that you need to be preparing, as conditions could start deteriorating in the next 2 to 5 days. Something to note, Thomas, and even though this is in French, does look like Meteo Madagascar is hinting at maybe a storm surge in excess of 2 meters in some places.
Yeah, it's looking like it could be pretty devastating. I mean, you have just a huge storm like this, and it's just going to be able to rack up so much water that by the time you make a full revolution around the storm, the amount of water that's accumulated there, yeah, that can be multiple meters. That's over 6 feet for our American viewers. Absolutely incredible situation, and not in a good way. It's looking really gnarly. So, unfortunately, that's what we have to be looking at the moment.
That is true, Thomas. And just to kind of put it in context, and we'll get Isaac in here because I think he does have some satellite, some radar imagery out of Mauritius and La Reunion. For the viewers that are not familiar with the Southwest Indian Ocean, I mean, it's very similar to the Northern Hemisphere. We call them hurricanes, they call them cyclones. But the reality is that this area is going to be taking the equivalent of a major hurricane, Category 3, maybe Category 4, and the damage potential is really bad. You're talking a stage 7 on the CDPS. I think some comparable storms, granted, the winds weren't the same, were recently stage 7. I want to say Hurricane Michael was a stage 7. That's probably the most recent one that I could think about off the top of my head, unless you know some more recent ones, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, stage sevens. I know that Laura was a stage 7. I know that Ida was a stage 7. Both of them scoring lower than this storm. This one's borderline stage 8, folks. So this is nearing your Ada Iota territory in terms of the sheer amount of damage that it can do.
Yeah, and we're going to throw it over to Isaac, as Isaac, you have that radar loop out of La Reunion. Go for it.
Sorry about that. What we're seeing right now is a storm continuing to undergo an eye wall efficient cyclone. You could tell that because you get this strong outer eye wall trying to become the dominant area, and then you get this inner eye wall still trying to chug along and fight for its life here. But as you see in the later frames, again going back down and weakening again. It's been just doing this off and on throughout the night, where the inner eye wall has started to fade, and then it comes back out again, and then fades, and then comes back out again. And this is going to be a long process here with the storm. It's not going to be like 5 hours from now. It's going to be completely clear and set in stone. This is one of those storms where it's going to take a little bit longer than usual for it to complete its eye wall efficient cycle. And because it's doing that, as Thomas and Tim have said earlier, this is going to make the impacts even worse for Madagascar, because, well, one, you got a bigger storm than initially forecast, and that means a better chance for more rainfall and bigger storm surge as well. Keep in mind, now the winds may not be as strong as maybe they are initially forecast to be, but you have that wind area now in a bigger radius than before. As you see, the old eye wall was about this size there, and then you can see this new eye wall popping up a lot larger than that. So even though it may be a little bit weaker than it was before, it has the larger wind field, as you can see there. So bottom line, because this is happening, it's going to have a larger wind field, bigger storm surge, and better chance for more dangerous rains, unfortunately, for the island of Madagascar, which got impacted heavily by Tropical Cyclone Anna not too long ago. So you need to be taking the cyclone really seriously here, and making sure you're prepared and you're batting down the hatches already. And don't wait for this to be on you. Do it as soon as you possibly can. Prepare ahead of time, and not the last hour or two before you get those really strong tropical storm force or cyclone force winds. This is a very serious storm for you guys.
Yeah, that is definitely the message we definitely want to be sending out, Isaac, is do not sleep on this storm. 115 miles an hour, Category 3, Stage 7, the CPS is nothing to snub your nose at.
Exactly. And here's a satellite loop over the past 2 hours. And you can see it's still undergoing an owl hitching cycle, but in those last few frames, you see that the outer eye wall produce deeper convection, and that's a telltale sign that the inner eye wall is going under a losing battle here, and eventually it's going to dissipate and die, and we're going to have to deal with this outer, larger eye wall right there. And just because this maybe might not reach, upper echelon category 4 or low end category 4 again, does not mean you need to be taking this lightly. A good example of this is that I can think of off the top of my head. I know it's a different hemisphere, but Hurricane Ike in 2008 had a really, really large eye wall, but only peaked as a high end category 2 cyclone with winds of 110 miles an hour. But because it was such a big cyclone, it had a storm surge of 5.3 meters upon landfall. So just because a storm's not, category 3 or category 4 intensity, perhaps when it's at making landfall, does not mean to be taking it not as seriously, especially with a storm with a eye wall this big here, as you can see on satellite imagery, and then here on this other satellite loop over the past 10 hours, the storm's just been undergoing an eye wall efficient cycle and getting a larger wind field than before.
Yeah, thank you for that. Go for it, Thomas.
I was just going to say, and the fact that the storm's growing, I think, like Isaac said earlier, that's just it's a bad sign of things, and I don't think that we can hammer home enough, because I know we've had a few questions on it. It does not matter whether this is a category 3, 4, or 5. It just doesn't. The impacts are the same. The preparations that need to be made are the same. So while I understand that there's this concern about just how high end the intensity can get, I really don't believe that it matters here that much. I mean, to answer the questions that are going on about the chances of a Category 5, I believe they're really low. I don't think this is going to be a Category 5 storm. But regardless, the impacts are going to still be really bad, and you need to be preparing the same way that you would if you thought it was going to be a Category 5 storm.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Thomas, I mean, we've seen what Madagascar has said on it. We do have the Joint Typhoon Warning Center cone up, and right now, the most JTWC is bringing this up to is probably what it's currently at, which is 115 knots. They may keep that maybe pretty consistent with that. So high in Category 3 is what the JTWC is hinting at. And they're actually forecasting gradual weakening going in. So maybe a low Category 3 by the time this does get into Madagascar in the next 2 days. So definitely the agency's kind of backing off. I know a day or two ago they were really hyping this up as being a very significant storm, and looks like that intensity they've backed off on, because, well, it actually hit that intensity sooner than anticipated, with it being one almost mid-category 4 yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. The intensity of the storm, when it does hit land, it looks like it's not going to be as high as we thought it was going to be, but that still doesn't change the fact that the impacts are going to be quite bad.
Yeah, and then just taking a quick look at... I just had it a minute ago. Where did I have it at? And the Meteo France one just a minute ago. Did I just lose it? No, I didn't. Okay, I can pull it back up. But while I'm doing that, that is our own cone from our graphics team, showing what that was anticipated to be a Category 4 about a day and a half from now. Obviously, Joint Typhoon Warning Center has backed off on that recently. And here we go. Here is the Meteo France cone, where they are still keeping it as an intense tropical cyclone going in. So anywhere between 118 and 166 kilometers an hour, which I believe that would be maybe Category 2 equivalent. So Meteo France going a little bit lower. Obviously, this is 10-minute sustained, so once you do convert it over, it would put it right at the low end of Category 3 once you do all the conversions.
Yeah,
there's that same cone there.
We did get a new bulletin from Meteo France here, so that's something. I'm just running some conversions right now, so that way we can get a good idea of what it is that is currently anticipated. So I'll get that there. 90 knot, 10 minute is the current intensity of the storm now, according to Meteo France. When making the conversion, that would mean that the storm is currently at minimal category 3, so still 115 miles per hour, 942 millibars according to Meteo France. Also a brand new cone. I'm not sure if this is the one that you were showing, Tim. This just came off. It's hot off the press. But
No, the one I might have would have been outdated. But yeah, go ahead and explain what Mateo France is looking at for that.
Yeah, well, the story's generally the same as the previous cone. There haven't been any major changes with this. You still have the storm being a pretty intense system when it does ram into Madagascar. You still have the massive wind field. You still have the tropical storm force winds over La Reunion, and you still have the storm re-strengthening as it moves out into the Mozambique Channel. So the general story remains the same, but there are some technical things, of course, that are going to change. We don't actually have the text bulletin just yet, so I don't know what the exact intensities are supposed to be, but I can tell you with high confidence that that we're probably going to be seeing a very similar forecast to what we were seeing previously.
Okay, Thomas. Now, this is a very good question that just came in. By the way, you can send your questions into our team at Force13 all in text. It'll light up for our team to answer. And this just came off of our YouTube chat. Forecast is only for it to be a high end category 3. Why is this such a big worry? Well, the Safir Simpson Hurricane Scale only tells just the surface of it. There's obviously a lot more parameters that go into the forecast. Yeah, the winds are going to be high end 2, high end 3, 100, 110 miles per hour. But then you've got the storm surge, you've got the rainfall, and then you also have the topography of the land being impacted. We showed that topography map of Madagascar earlier. I had to make a comparison to it. This would be almost like a Cat 3 going into the western side of Mexico, where it is coastal flatland for like the first 20, 30, 40 miles, and then you hit that mountainous terrain. So that definitely changes the perspective of what's going on. What's your thoughts with that, Thomas?
Well, when explaining why this is such a big concern, you have to go over all the different factors. So we'll start with the wind. Firstly, category 2 or 3. Of course, that's no joke. That's still winds that are going to be near, if not over, 115 miles per hour. If we actually take a look here at a wind swath over the next 5 days, you can see right along the coast there, those winds getting up to 110 miles per hour if this model solution were to verify. So you're seeing some pretty significant stuff there. The GFS verifies, you're getting about 85 and 90. Regardless, this is probably going to be, I personally favor this solution, the solution with the 110 plus mile an hour winds making it to shore. But regardless, that's one aspect of this. Those are going to cause serious damage. Here's the actual real damage maker, though. There is significant rainfall that is expected. And these areas are very flood prone. They're already very saturated because of Cyclone Ana, which moved through not too long ago. And so as a result, this over 500 millimeters of rain, for those in the United States, that's going to be over 16 inches of rain. That's going to cause some serious flooding, mudslides, things like that. And those kinds of things are going to cause serious problems. In Madagascar, the poverty rate is very high. The famine in Madagascar right now is very bad because many of those crops were destroyed before. So these people are already in shambles to some degree. And, just to give some context, child malnourishment in Madagascar is over 40%. So this is an area that is very impoverished and an area that is not very good with disasters. So when you have a category 2 or 3 with over 16 inches of rain, that's going to cause some real problems because we don't have the well-built homes that can handle that stuff. We don't have the infrastructure or the messaging in order to get the information out to these people. They don't have electricity. They don't have things like that. They don't have ways to preserve what they can. They can't just evacuate like we can. So those are some of the things that make it more concerning. And then the final thing that makes it a bigger concern is the wave heights. So if we take a look at the wave heights here as this moves towards, and again, this is the European model, so this isn't exactly what's going to happen, but this gives us a good idea. You can see those wave heights as this gets close, over 12 meters. And then as this moves ashore, you're having right along the coast there, those wave heights exceeding 10 meters in the areas that get the worst, that get hit the worst. And so, if you have 10-meter waves moving ashore, that's going to cause some very serious damage. I mean, that's going to move well inland.
And what's interesting to note, Thomas, and before I have you keep going, that's just the wave height. That's not even factoring in the storm surge that's anticipated with this.
No, that's the wave height as a result of the storm. So this is
really?
Yeah, so this accounts for the storm. And so it's kind of like a combination of what wave heights would have been there plus what the storm's doing. So you're getting these 10-meter plus wave heights with this, and that's going to be serious. That's going to move quite far inland. So this is going to be a really bad situation for people. And you can see those swells there as well, coming in from both directions. We're not going to have those major swells. You can see all the water, just that volume of water that gets moved away and the volume of water that gets moved back over using the swells. But wave heights, that's the primary thing. You can see they're over 10 meters along the coast. So winds are just part of the story. Yes, the winds are going to be category 2 or 3. They're not upper echelon. They're not the worst they get, but they're still bad. The flooding is going to be very bad. And finally, we're going to be seeing very high wave heights. And the combination of those 3 things, that's why we're so concerned about this storm.
And that makes sense, Thomas. And we do have some other questions coming in. What is our thoughts after Madagascar? Because I know most models do have Batsarai going into the Mozambique channel. I know a lot of the models have backed off of this going directly into Mozambique and starting to turn south after it gets past Madagascar.
Yeah, that's definitely been a trend. It's a good trend. There's a trend now that because this storm got stronger than it was supposed to be, the high pressure system that's been influencing it has broken down some, and that means that it's going to be able to recurve sooner than what was initially anticipated. I can give you a good idea of this. You can see it beginning to turn away on the Meteo France cone, but I think that this gives you a really good idea. This is what's called a spaghetti plot that I have up on my screen. This is using the global forecast system for those of you that know weather models. But this gives you a good idea of the track of the storm. So obviously we have the storm moving into Madagascar, but afterwards we have a pretty good consensus now that this is going to manage to recurve. So most of our spaghetti models, most of the ensemble members as we call them, show this thing curving out to sea. Of course we have a couple of outliers here that move into Mozambique. That's not out of the question yet, but it's looking like a pretty good chance that this is going to move out to sea. So if I'm in Mozambique, I'm not letting my guard down yet, but I'm starting to think maybe I can breathe a sigh of relief in not too long as a result of this storm. Likely to miss now, likely to move to the south and recurve out to sea before that happens. But this is pretty far out. This is over 5 days. This is 6, 7, 8 days out that we're seeing it recurve. So things can definitely change. They changed before, they can change again. But as of now, it's looking like Mozambique might go with only some rain and some bigger wind gusts and not anything of the magnitude that we were previously anticipating.
Yeah, and the JTWC does echo that sentiment, Thomas, as we do bring that JTWC cone back up. Obviously, their cone only goes out 5 days. So, yeah, right now, if you look at the cone of uncertainty, at the extreme edge, I mean, you do have some parts of Mozambique, Beira, getting down to Maurice, and maybe the southern edge of Mozambique being part of that extreme outlier cone of uncertainty. So I wouldn't quite say you're completely out of the woods, but you're out of the woods enough that, as Thomas said, you can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief, but I would still keep your eye on it just in case. But yeah, the main consensus does have this staying offshore, and with the way the cyclones work in the southern hemisphere, you're going to be on what I believe is the clean side of the storm, where you're going to be getting the weaker side of it if you do get any kind of influence off of it whatsoever.
That is in fact the case. And yeah, you can see there right outside that cone of uncertainty there for the wind fields. You can see that. And that's for tropical storm force winds. Those could still go well inland there. But yeah, that dive south, that's now the current expectation according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. So it's definitely good news. You can see there, maybe even just stretching into South Africa just the slightest bit with tropical storm force winds, but that's not currently anticipated.
No, it's not. We do have other questions coming in off of our chat again. You can tag us at Force13 all in text. It'll light up for our team to answer. Biggest question that we've got coming in is whether it be a category 3, 4, or 5 at any point, and when will replacement cycle end, and will the storm grow after that? Right now, it is still a category 3, both on the Meteo France scale, which still has it as an intense tropical cyclone. Joint Typhoon Warning Center still keeping it at a category 3 at, I believe, 115 miles per hour was the numbers I had at last check. The eyewall replacement cycle, those are such a strange phenomenon that there is no real definitive time frame as to when it'll actually end. These storms kind of have their own minds. They can do one, they can do mergers, they can try to do one and fail. So we really don't have an actual time frame for when the eyewall replacement cycle will end. But if it does between now and the time that this could make landfall in Madagascar, we could see this potentially ramp up a little bit depending on what atmospheric conditions it has to work with, that and the water temperature and the oceanic content in this area.
Absolutely, and the eyewall replacement cycle, it's definitely something that's been inhibiting this storm a bit from strengthening in terms of raw wind speed, but you can see just the sheer size of it on your satellite imagery there. I have now a research model. This is courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. This is the HWRF. This is one of those weather models that we use to forecast tropical cyclones like this when they're happening. And so this right here, this is a hurricane-related model. That's what the H stands for. And this uses a 3D simulated physics core that's the same as those in like our NAM GFS for those of you in America. Basically, this is like the NAM for tropical cyclones, if that makes any sense. So it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to give you a decent representation of what's going on. It shows the current eyewall replacement cycle, and it predicts that that inner eyewall dies out by the time we get to around 9Z Friday. So around 9 a.m. UTC Friday. So that's going to be during the morning hours into the afternoon Madagascar time that this could complete. Could complete, not will, could. The storm then begins to deepen again according to this model. But you can see there as it heads towards the coastline, this thing makes a potent landfall as a massive storm. You can just see all the rainfall that it's dropping. And it's dropping this here on Saturday afternoon in Madagascar there. So this is around 3 p.m. Saturday afternoon. This is expected to be dropping all that rain in Madagascar before it plows through. So the current expectation that eyewall replacement cycle, if I were a betting man, I think it will complete before the storm ends up hitting Madagascar. When exactly, that's unknown. But regardless, this is going to be a big-time landfalling storm for Madagascar, and it's something that people need to be watching closely regardless of how that eyewall replacement cycle goes.
Yeah, and I think the last time that we've actually had a major cyclone of this size or intensity, and I might be wrong because I'm not quite the historian that Nathan is, but I want to say Cyclone Belna of 2019 maybe is the most recent that that obviously hitting the western side as a category 2 equivalent.
That is for sure. I mean, this is going to be. Yeah, it's been a while since the last time we've had a storm this strong hit Madagascar. Do we know when the last time that we had a category 3 or 4 hit Madagascar was?
Off the top of my head, no. I know Cyclone Kenneth obviously brought some impacts to it. Obviously, no direct landfalls. Most notably, Cyclone Idai also bringing some impacts to Madagascar. Obviously, again, not making landfall in Madagascar. So it has been quite a while since we have had a cyclone of this intensity hit this area.
The last one I could think of would be Cyclone Anawa in 2017. That, I believe, made a Category 4 landfall on the northeastern tip of Madagascar in March 2017.
Yeah, that is in fact correct. That was a big storm, and then that moved right down the middle of the country.
Yeah, it did. See, other questions. How many deaths can we see for Batsarai? We really won't know until this actually gets through all of the Mascarenes Islands and through Madagascar. What category will Cyclone Batsirai be after hitting Madagascar? That, again, we really don't know because we don't know how much the terrain is going to disrupt the core of this system. Again, to put it into context, and we kind of showed this earlier, that Madagascar is mainly coastal flatlands along the edge, and then you have a lot of mountains that go through the center of the island. So the best perspective that I made earlier is this would be like a category 3 hitting the west coast of Mexico. You have the coastal flatlands for like the first 20, 30, 40 miles, and then you have the mountainous terrain, and that can classically disrupt systems, but I'm not sure the elevation of the mountains across Madagascar, so I'm not entirely sure how much that core is going to be disrupted. See, we have a question asking to explain the weak side of a storm. Okay, now this is something that I know we can definitely answer. At least in the northern hemisphere, when you have a tropical cyclone, hurricane, typhoon, or a cyclone in the North Indian Ocean, the strongest side of the storm is usually the northeastern quadrant. That is quite the opposite when you're dealing with a southern hemisphere system. I believe it is the southeast quadrant that is the strongest.
Yeah, so basically, the way that you can find out what the strongest quadrant is going to be is you have to find out what direction the storm's moving, and whatever side is moving along with the storm is normally going to be the strongest. So since this storm is generally moving to the west-southwest, what you're going to get is when the storm is moving west-southwest, the strongest side is going to be the southwestern side of the storm, right? And that makes some sense, because if your difference in pressure is about the same around the whole storm, but the storm is actually moving, then that storm movement's going to reduce the wind speed by the factor of that movement on the northern side and up it by the factor on the southern side. So basically what that means is that if you have a storm moving at 15 miles per hour, then you're going to add 15 miles per hour to what the wind would be on this side and subtract 15 from this side. And that's about what the winds end up being. So with this storm, the strongest side is definitely going to be the south. It's going to be the southeastern side, actually. My bad. With the southwestern side being when the storm starts to curl back up. So when it's moving right along with the motion there, that's where the strongest winds are. So yeah, southeastern quadrant, like you were saying, Tim, that's correct. That's the strongest side of the storm right now.
And yeah, that is the bad news right now. Just looking off your radar is La Reunion, specifically right around the Saint Denis area, is getting the worst of that strongest side of the storm at this time.
Yeah, they're getting hammered pretty good with some heavy rainfall and some gustier winds. Definitely tropical storm force winds there. They're not in the eye wall, so they're not going to be getting those big time winds, but you're still going to get, like I think you were saying, big time storm surge, big time rain. You're getting pretty much the worst that the storm has to offer in every way except for winds. That's why we have that red alert in effect from Meteo France. And what that red alert basically means is that you need to be staying informed, and that basically you need to be seeking shelter. That's directly from Meteo France. So they're saying you're not allowed to drive. Driving's prohibited. You need to be sheltered. You need to be in your home. You need to make sure that you are taking the proper precautions to take life-saving action from this storm.
Exactly, Thomas. And we're going to go back over to Isaac, as it looks like we have radar loop off of the Mauritius radar there.
Yes, this is Mauritius, and then La Reunion is over there on the southwest. I was trying to pull that up really quick because it keeps resetting, but this is the Mauritius radar, and you can see that concentric eye wall here, the outer eye wall, which is starting to become the dominant one, and then you can see that stubborn inner eye wall, which is not wanting to let go, still right there, that kind of little U shape there in the center of your where my cursor's at, that's the inner eye wall that's been just persistently trying to stay alive for the past probably 10 hours or so here, and it's still there. And if you take a look at satellite imagery from Meteosat 8, you could also see that going on. See this strong outer eye wall trying to become the dominant one, and then that inner one still fighting for its life there, but fighting a losing battle as the outer eye wall produces more and more cooler convection. So it's only a matter of time before the inner eye wall kicks the bucket and the outer eye wall is the dominant one. And this is what we're worried about here, is that outer eye wall, since it's just going to be a bigger area, it's going to produce more heavy rain. It's going to produce a bigger storm surge. The winds may not be the same as they were maybe 2 days ago when it was peaking out a little bit, but those winds are going to be in over a wider area here. So like I said, for instance, with Hurricane Ike, that only peaked as a high-end Category 2, but had a storm surge of 5.3 meters because of just how wide it was in the large area that it encompassed in the Gulf of Mexico. So just because a storm's not, Category 3 or Category 4 intensity does not mean you need to stop taking it seriously here, especially with a system of this size and this magnitude. Tim?
All right, Isaac, and we are now joined in studio with Kenneth. Good morning to you there, Kenneth, out of the Hong Kong studio there. Obviously, I know you have been keeping an eye on Batsarai through most of the overnight hours, your time. What is your thoughts on how Batsarai's been looking, and what is your opinions for any of the watches and warnings that have been put in effect in La Reunion and Madagascar?
So hello here at 2:46 a.m. So recently, I'll share my screen as well.
All right. If you want to go ahead and pull up whatever you have.
Okay. So since yesterday night, 30 hours ago, it was weakening due to our replacement cycle, but in recent frames, in the past few hours, you can see those convection, those are orange, red, blowing up and become more consolidated. You can see a more defined outer eye wall, and the inner eye wall is just die out, and the outer eye wall becomes more dominant after sunset local time, which it probably is. I think it's already re-intensifying in terms of the maximum winds, and likely a Category 4 comeback is with something within 12 hours, I'll say, and all the way up to the Madagascar landfall, which that will mean something catastrophic impact possible. A ton of rainfall, storm surge, which I believe Thomas has gone through that a bit earlier. So I'm not going with some surface observations in La Reunion. This is the maximum sustained winds. You can see Reunion is currently blowing easterly wind mainly. Strong force winds, higher winds in higher elevation, and here is the gust, which is even more even stronger. The gust winds. You can see these some higher elevation areas at the middle of the island. Is over 100 kilometers per hour, 133, 134. Hurricane force winds are currently in effect for La Reunion currently. Pretty destructive winds. So do not just do not be take off guard because it has some distance. There's not overcast. The overcast is not directly over Reunion, but the spowering band is also pretty strong. You can also see the radar right now. You can see this rain band is still affecting Reunion right now. Those 10 millimeters, 5 to 10 millimeters rainfall currently affecting Reunion, so as the gale force winds with hurricane force gusts. So those in La Reunion, please stay indoor and do not approach the coast. Do not approach exposed windows. Stay indoor. stop all water activities. You must not go to any water activities right now currently. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of that rainfall rate that you were referring to, Kenneth, we'll go back over to the Real Earth radar and we'll take a look at some of the rainfall rates that are coming down. As some of these areas starting to get 20 to 30 millimeters of rain per hour. Obviously, Mauritius right now getting about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain per hour over this area, and over towards Reunion, definitely getting some heavier spots. It looks like a couple spots are getting into the 20 to 30 millimeter rain per hour. And what's interesting is you can just see the influence that Batsarai has. Some of these outer bands getting up into the Madagascar area already. Some of these northern bands starting to clip that area.
I would also like to point out this radar is truly from the radar from Mauritius, and the one you're showing in the live stream is a simulated one, but still Mauritius the rainfall actually occurred mainly yesterday, which the rainfall total is like, if I remember correctly, around 200 millimeters total or more, and with maximum gust winds of 151 recorded in Mauritius.
So 8 inches of rain and wind gusts in excess of almost 90 miles per hour once you convert that to imperial units. So definitely Mauritius taking a beating yesterday. And looks like some of our viewers still indicating that Mauritius is still even getting hammered at this hour. One of our viewers actually saying that they still have strong winds in the area. So that is good information for not only for us, but our viewers to know that these islands, even though Batsarai is so far away from these islands, that they are still getting hammered with the outer bands and the peripheral winds that are coming off of this storm.
Yes, currently strong wind and high wave warning is still in effect for Mauritius.
Yeah, that is currently what they do have going on right now. Mauritius did drop their class warnings earlier, still keeping that high wind and high wave warning in effect. Reunion still under that red alert cyclone alert for right now. And Madagascar still under those yellow and green cyclone alerts. I would not be surprised as this does get closer that maybe Madagascar raises some of those yellows to the level red alerts probably in the next 12 to 24 hours.
Speaking of rainfall, I just made a little quick radar loop over the past 13 hours from the Mauritius radar site, showing the movement of the cyclone over the past 13 hours. And as you see on this radar loop, it's really barely moved much, if any, in the last 13 hours. You could see it trying to form that outer eye wall there, and that prominent inner eye wall still trying to fight for its life there. And then, of course, on the bottom of your screen here, the bottom lower right here, you can see this is Reunion here, and they're getting just slammed by just rain band after rain band after rain band here, getting more and more flooding rainfall here as the hours tick on by. But this is, again, a loop over the past 13 hours of the cyclone, and get to see what it's been doing here.
Yeah, Isaac, and we are getting some reports in from our viewers. One of our viewers in Northwest La Reunion getting 130 kilometer an hour gust, been that way for about 5 or 6 hours. Maybe got 190 kilometer an hour gust at Mito. So that is some good information coming out of our viewers in Mauritius and La Reunion. We do have a couple more questions coming in, then we'll get our team's final thoughts here and recap what we have going on with Batsarai. We have a question asking, will Batsarai hit Zimbabwe? I think Zimbabwe is a little bit inland from Mozambique, so I'm not entirely sure Zimbabwe is going to be in the line of fire. And I think this is something you had touched on a little bit, Thomas, if you went with the outliers on whether or not Batsarai could hit South Africa.
Yeah, so currently, when it comes to that, it's looking unlikely, but there is a slight possibility that South Africa gets impacts. You're definitely going to get some rain from this, I think. unless this goes way east of where it's supposed to be. But at least as of now, if I'm in South Africa, I can actually time this out a little bit for you. You can see here, this is at about 3 o'clock on Saturday. We can see this thing move into Madagascar, moves out, moves back overseas, and then you can see it there moving fairly close to Mozambique there. But it's going to be at about this point, if it moves farther west, you're going to get some significant rain. You can see how far those outer bands extend, but the expectation right now is that this will not end up being a situation where the eye wall is going to be anywhere near you. So could be some heavier rains, but it's unlikely that you're going to see any big-time winds or anything like that.
All right, and just to recap what we do have going on, we do have Cyclone Batsirai right now bearing down on the Mascarenes Islands, Mauritius, and Reunion, despite being on the south side of the storm, are getting hammered with rain and strong winds. This storm will be moving towards the west, towards the Madagascar island region here in the next day and a half. Current warnings right now for La Reunion do include that red alert cyclone warning for La Reunion. Mauritius does have high winds and high seas warning in effect at this time, and we will briefly pull up the latest warnings from Meteo Madagascar. They do have yellow cyclone alerts going from the province of Saint Marie all the way down the entire east coast, with green cyclone alerts being all the way up into the northeastern corner of Madagascar, down to the west coast, and down into the southern provinces. So again, this storm, not something you want to take lightly. It is a stage 7, borderline stage 8 on our cyclone destruction potential scale. Final thoughts from our team right quick.
Well, Batsarai is a very serious cyclone. Currently still in the process for an eye wall replacement cycle, increasing in size. Maybe not so much in the wind department, but in size. And the main thing to take away, it's going to be a massive flooding threat, massive storm surge threat, and a wind threat as well. On top of that, for those of you guys in Madagascar, your time is ticking here to prepare in advance for this, and make sure you have everything ready to go and set to leave. And don't be sticking around on the coast waiting for it to happen and waiting for it to go downhill. Take your actions as soon as you possibly can to save your life, and don't wait and don't delay on that.
All right, any other thoughts from our team?
Thing that I just want to drive home is that it does not matter what the Safir Simpson category of the storm is. Doesn't matter. The storm is going to be dropping significant rainfall, over 500 millimeters, especially in mountainous regions. Many areas getting over 300 millimeters in not so mountainous regions. We're going to be seeing wave heights that are probably going to be exceeding 8 meters at a conservative level, over 10 meters at an aggressive level, and we're going to be seeing strong winds battering the coast, whether this ends up being a category 2, 3, or 4. So it's going to be a big-time cyclone for Madagascar, stage 7 on the CDPS scale. Do not let yourself get wrapped up in the Safir Simpson category.
All right, and that's going to be it from our team here. This has been Force 13 Live. You can keep an eye on Batsarai on our social media outlets, keyword Force 13 on Twitter, Facebook, and here on YouTube. And you can join the discussion over on our Discord server, discord.gg/413. Our team will have a storm update on Batsarai later on in the day. So if you are in La Reunion, Mauritius, batten down the hatches, stay safe with this storm until it pushes through. And if you're in Madagascar, you need to be getting your preparations done, as this storm will be a very historic storm for your area. Stay safe, keep an eye on our outlets, and take care.